Melody Park sat quietly at the edge of her seat in the practice room, her fingers hovering over the piano keys. She took a deep breath as Mr. Reynolds paced behind her, his footsteps heavy against the wooden floor. At 16, Melody had grown used to the knot in her stomach that formed whenever her piano coach watched her play. "Again," Mr. Reynolds said, tapping his finger against the metronome. "And this time, try to feel something beyond your own nervousness." Melody nodded and repositioned her hands. The Chopin piece she'd been practicing for weeks was beautiful but difficult. Her fingers danced across the keys as she closed her eyes, trying to lose herself in the music rather than worry about her coach's reaction. Mr. Reynolds was known throughout the region as the best piano instructor money could buy. His students won competitions and earned spots at prestigious music schools. Parents fought to get their children into his studio, and he only accepted those he deemed worthy of his time. 3 years ago, when Melody had auditioned for him, he'd barely smiled when accepting her. "Raw talent," he had told her parents, "but we'll see if she has what it takes to truly excel." Those words had followed Melody through countless lessons. Every compliment from Mr. Reynolds came with criticism attached. Every achievement was overshadowed by what still needed improvement. "Stop, stop, stop." Mr. Reynolds waved his hands and Melody's fingers froze mid-phrase. "You're rushing the middle section again. This isn't a race, Melody." "Sorry," she mumbled, staring down at the black and white keys. "Don't apologize. Fix it." He sighed heavily, checking his expensive watch. "Let's take it from the beginning of page 4. Melody's parents waited in their old car outside the studio, just as they did twice every week. Her mother worked extra shifts at the hospital to pay for these lessons, and her father had taken on weekend work. The pressure to make their sacrifices worthwhile weighed on Melody's shoulders every time she sat at the piano. "The spring showcase is in 3 weeks," Mr. Reynolds reminded her as the lesson ended. "The piece isn't competition ready." "I'll practice more," Melody promised, gathering her sheet music. "You'd better. There will be scouts from Westridge Conservatory there. This could determine your future." Melody nodded, knowing exactly what was at stake. Getting into a good music program was her dream, and her parents' hope for her future. Mr. Reynolds had connections that could make that happen, which was why they tolerated his harsh teaching style. At home that evening, Melody sat at their family piano. It wasn't the grand piano at Mr. Reynolds' studio, but it was special to her. This was the piano her grandmother had taught her on when she was just 5 years old, before anyone knew she had real talent. "How was practice?" her little brother Jin asked, peeking into the living room. "The usual," Melody said with a small smile. "Mr. Reynolds thinks I'm not ready for the showcase." Jin plopped down on the couch near the piano. "He always says that. Then you go and play amazing and he takes all the credit." Melody laughed softly. "That's not entirely wrong." Her brother was the only one who truly understood how difficult lessons with Mr. Reynolds could be. Her parents saw only the results, the trophies and certificates lining the walls of their modest home. "Play for me," Jin said. "I bet it sounds great." Melody positioned her hands and began to play Chopin's Ballade No. 1. Without Mr. Reynolds watching, her body relaxed. The music flowed differently, more naturally, with emotion that came from somewhere deep inside her. When she finished, Jin clapped enthusiastically. "See, perfect." "Not perfect," Melody said, though she smiled at her brother's support. "But better than at the studio." Her mother called them for dinner and the conversation turned to school and Jin's science project. It wasn't until they were clearing the table that her father brought up the showcase. "Mr. Reynolds called today," he said, drying a plate carefully. "He says you picked a very challenging piece for the showcase." Melody tensed. "He approved it 3 months ago. He's concerned it might be too advanced." Her father's voice was gentle but firm. "He thinks you should consider something simpler." "I've been practicing this piece since January," Melody protested. "I can play it." Her mother joined the conversation, wiping her hands on a towel. "Your teacher knows what's best, honey. If he thinks you should change pieces—" "He doesn't think I'm good enough," Melody interrupted. "He never does." An uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. Her parents exchanged glances, the kind that meant they were worried about the money they were spending. "I can do this," Melody insisted. "Please, just trust me," her father sighed. "We'll talk to him again at your next lesson." That night, Melody couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, replaying Mr. Reynolds' criticisms in her head. Was he right? Was she being stubborn about a piece that was beyond her abilities? She slipped out of bed and opened her sheet music in the dim light from her desk lamp. Her fingers moved silently over her bedspread, practicing the troublesome passages without making a sound. The next morning, Melody woke up early. While the house was still quiet, she tiptoed to the living room and began to play, using the soft pedal to keep the volume down. This piece meant something to her. It wasn't just notes on a page, it was how she felt inside when words failed her. At school, Melody found it hard to focus. Her mind kept drifting back to the piano and the upcoming showcase. During lunch, her friend Tara noticed her distraction. "Earth to Melody," Tara said, waving a hand in front of her face. "You haven't heard a word I've said." "Sorry," Melody replied. "Just thinking about this piece I'm playing for the showcase." "The one your scary teacher is giving you trouble about?" Tara asked, taking a bite of her sandwich. Melody nodded. "He wants me to switch to something easier, but I've worked so hard on this one." "Then don't switch," Tara said simply. "You're always saying how he underestimates you. Prove him wrong." It sounded so easy when Tara said it. But Tara didn't understand the complicated relationship between Melody and her piano coach. Mr. Reynolds could open doors for her future, or close them completely. After school, Melody headed to the public library. In a quiet corner, she found recordings of professional pianists playing Chopin's Ballade. She listened through headphones, noting the different interpretations, the pacing, the emotional shifts. One particular recording caught her attention. The pianist wasn't as technically perfect as some of the others, but there was something special about the performance. It felt like a story being told through music. That evening, Melody practiced differently. Instead of focusing solely on the notes, she thought about the story she wanted to tell. By the time her parents called her for dinner, her fingers ached, but her heart felt lighter. 2 days later, Melody had her regular lesson with Mr. Reynolds. She played through the piece, incorporating what she'd learned from the recordings while adding her own interpretation. When she finished, she looked up expectantly. Mr. Reynolds' face was unreadable. "Your technical execution has improved," he admitted reluctantly, "but you're still missing the emotional maturity this piece requires." Melody's heart sank. "I thought, the spring showcase isn't just another recital," Mr. Reynolds cut in. "There will be people there who could determine your future in music. I'm not sure this piece showcases your strengths." "I can do it," Melody insisted. "I just need more time to—" "Time isn't the issue," he interrupted again. "Some pieces require life experience to interpret correctly. At 16, there are certain emotional depths you simply haven't experienced." Melody bit her lip, fighting back tears of frustration. Mr. Reynolds turned to his calendar. "We have 4 more lessons before the showcase," he said. "If I don't see significant improvement by next week, we'll need to select a different piece." On the drive home, Melody stared out the window as her father tried to comfort her. "Maybe he's right," he suggested gently. "There will be other chances to play this piece." "He doesn't believe in me," Melody said quietly. "He never has." That night, Melody made a decision. She would prove Mr. Reynolds wrong, not through argument but through her playing. She created a practice schedule, setting her alarm an hour earlier each morning and staying up later each night. Her mother noticed the dark circles forming under her eyes. "Don't push yourself too hard," she cautioned. "I'm fine," Melody assured her. "This is important to me." Days passed and Melody's determination grew. She recorded herself playing and listened critically, making adjustments. She found videos of master classes online and took notes on the feedback given to other pianists. During her next lesson, Mr. Reynolds raised his eyebrows as she played. "Better," he admitted when she finished, "though still not what I'd consider showcase ready." For Melody, that small acknowledgement felt like a victory. She left the studio with renewed energy, ready to work even harder. What she didn't know was that Mr. Reynolds had already been making other plans. Plans that would test not just her playing ability, but her courage and conviction in ways she never could have imagined. The week before the spring showcase, Melody arrived at Mr. Reynolds' studio with her sheet music clutched tightly to her chest. She had practiced until her fingers felt numb, determined to prove herself worthy of performing Chopin's Ballade. "You're early," Mr. Reynolds noted as she entered, not looking up from the papers on his desk. "I wanted to warm up." Melody explained, setting her bag down by the door. The studio felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just her nerves. Melody sat at the grand piano, stretching her fingers before placing them gently on the keys. She played a few scales to warm up, each note crisp and clear in the quiet room. Mr. Reynolds finally looked up, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Let's begin with the Chopin. Show me what progress you've made." Melody nodded, took a deep breath, and began to play. She had practiced this piece so many times that the notes lived in her muscles now. As she played, she focused on the emotions behind the music. The longing, the hope, the moments of darkness and light. She felt good about her performance, better than she had in previous lessons. When she finished, she looked up expectantly. Mr. Reynolds was silent for a long moment, tapping his pen against his desk. "Your technical execution has improved," he admitted, "but there's still something missing." Melody's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "The emotional depth, Melody." He stood up and walked toward the piano. "This piece requires more than just hitting the right notes at the right time. It requires understanding, maturity, life experience." "I understand the piece," Melody insisted, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Reynolds laughed, a short, dismissive sound that made Melody flinch. "How could you possibly understand it? You're 16. What do you know about real struggle, about true passion?" The words stung more than they should have. Melody stared down at the keys, unable to look at him. "Play it again," he instructed. "And this time, try to feel something beyond your limited teenage emotions." Melody positioned her hands and started again. But now her confidence was shaken and her fingers felt stiff and awkward on the keys. She made a mistake in the second measure, then another in the fourth. "Stop," Mr. Reynolds said sharply. "This is worse than before." "I can do better," Melody said, her voice small. "Clearly you cannot," he replied. "Not in time for the showcase." He returned to his desk and pulled out a folder. "I've been considering this for some time. Your technical skills are good, Melody, but this piece is beyond your emotional range. It would be embarrassing for both of us if you performed it in your current state." Melody felt a cold dread spreading through her chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Thomas will be performing Chopin's ballet at the showcase instead." Thomas was Mr. Reynolds' oldest student, a college freshman who had studied with him for nearly 8 years. Melody had heard him play at previous recitals. He was technically flawless, if somewhat mechanical in his delivery. "But that's my piece," Melody said, her voice barely audible. "I've been working on it for months." "And Thomas has been working on it for years," Mr. Reynolds countered. "He's ready." "You're not?" Melody felt tears threatening to spill, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of him. "What am I supposed to play then?" she asked, hating how her voice shook. Mr. Reynolds handed her a folder. "Clementi's Sonatina in C major. It's well within your abilities, and you can have it performance ready by next week." Melody stared at the sheet music in disbelief. The Clementi piece was something she might have played when she was 12 or 13. It was pretty but simple, nothing that would impress the conservatory scouts. "This is a children's piece," she said, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. Mr. Reynolds' expression hardened. "It's a piece that suits your current level of artistic maturity. If you disagree with my professional assessment, perhaps you should find another teacher." The threat hung in the air between them. Both knew finding another teacher of his caliber would be nearly impossible, especially this close to college application season. "I'll call your parents to discuss this change," Mr. Reynolds continued. "They'll understand that this is in your best interest." Melody sat frozen at the piano bench as Mr. Reynolds made the call. She heard only his side of the conversation, his voice smooth and reasonable as he explained his decision to her father. "Yes, I understand she's worked hard. No, it's not a question of effort. It's simply a matter of artistic readiness. The Clementi will showcase her technical precision without exposing her limitations. Yes, I believe this is the right decision for her future." When he hung up, he turned to Melody with a satisfied expression. "Your father agrees this is for the best. Now shall we work on the Clementi?" Melody wanted to scream, to argue, to refuse, but what choice did she have? Her parents trusted Mr. Reynolds. They believed he knew what was best for her musical career. The remainder of the lesson passed in a blur. Melody played through the Clementi piece mechanically, barely hearing Mr. Reynolds' instructions. Her mind was elsewhere, still reeling from the sudden change of plans. "You'll play second in the program." Mr. Reynolds informed her as she packed up her things. Thomas will close the showcase with the belade. Melody nodded silently, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Don't look so defeated, Mr. Reynolds said, his tone softening slightly. There will be other opportunities for challenging pieces when you're ready. Outside, her father waited in the car. One look at Melody's face told him everything he needed to know. He called me, he said as Melody buckled her seatbelt. He thinks this is for the best. It's not, Melody said, her voice tight with unshed tears. He doesn't believe in me, Dad. He never has. Her father sighed, pulling away from the curb. Mr. Reynolds has been teaching for 30 years, honey. If he says you're not ready, then I'm not ready, Melody finished bitterly. I know. The drive home was silent. Melody stared out the window, watching the familiar streets blur past. Her father tried to make conversation a few times, but eventually gave up when Melody's responses remained monosyllabic. At home, her mother was waiting with a sympathetic smile. I heard about the change of plans, she said, pulling Melody into a hug. Sometimes a simpler piece performed beautifully is better than a difficult piece that's not quite there yet. Melody nodded against her mother's shoulder, not trusting herself to speak. I made your favorite dinner, her mother continued, releasing her. Chicken dumplings. I'm not hungry, Melody said. I think I'll just go practice. Her mother exchanged a worried glance with her father but nodded. Okay, honey. We'll save you a plate. In the living room, Melody sat at the piano staring at the Clementi piece Mr. Reynolds had given her. It was simple, predictable, safe. Nothing that would make the conservatory scouts sit up and take notice. She set it aside and pulled out the Chopin instead. Her fingers found the opening notes automatically, but after a few measures she stopped, hearing Mr. Reynolds' criticism echoing in her head. What do you know about real struggle, about true passion? The door creaked and Jin poked his head in. Mom said you got a new piece for the showcase. Melody nodded, not looking up from the piano. Can I hear it? He asked, coming to sit beside her on the bench. Instead of playing the Clementi, Melody launched into the Chopin ballade. Her fingers moved with a new intensity, fueled by frustration and hurt. When she finished, her breathing was ragged as if she'd been running. Jin was quiet for a moment. That was different, he finally said. Better, I think, more real. Mr. Reynolds gave the piece to Thomas, Melody told him, her voice flat. He says I'm not ready. Jin's face scrunched up in confusion. But you just played it perfectly. Not according to him. He says I don't have the emotional maturity. The words tasted bitter on her tongue. That's stupid, Jin said with the straightforward honesty of a 12-year-old. You put more feeling into it than anyone. Melody gave him a small smile, grateful for his unwavering support. It doesn't matter what we think, Mr. Reynolds has made his decision. So you're just going to give up? Jin asked, looking disappointed. The question hung in the air. Was she? After all the hours of practice, all the early mornings and late nights, was she really going to let Mr. Reynolds take this away from her? No, Melody said slowly, the beginnings of a plan forming in her mind. I'm not giving up, Jin grinned. Good, because that would be really boring. Melody laughed, feeling some of the tension leave her body. I need to think about this. Later that night, Melody lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The spring showcase was just over a week away. Mr. Reynolds expected her to play the Clementi piece. Simple, safe, forgettable. Her parents, trusting in his expertise, expected the same. But what if she didn't? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. What if, when her moment came, she played the Chopin instead? What would Mr. Reynolds do? What would the audience think? Melody turned onto her side, watching the moonlight filter through her curtains. It would be risky. Mr. Reynolds might never forgive such an act of defiance. Her parents might be angry or embarrassed, but if she succeeded, if she played the piece well enough to prove Mr. Reynolds wrong, it might change everything. Melody closed her eyes, making her decision. She would practice both pieces, the Clementi for her lessons and the Chopin in secret. And when the showcase came, she would be ready. One way or another, she would show Mr. Reynolds exactly what she was capable of. The next morning, Melody woke before her alarm. For a moment, she lay still, remembering everything that had happened at yesterday's lesson. The hurt and disappointment were still fresh, but something else had taken root alongside them. Determination. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed downstairs to the piano. The house was quiet, her family still asleep. Perfect. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play the Clementi piece Mr. Reynolds had assigned her. It was simple, almost mindless for someone of her skill level. She could probably learn it perfectly in 2 days, which meant she'd have the rest of the week to work on what really mattered. After running through the Clementi 3 times, Melody carefully pulled out her copy of Chopin's Ballade from where she'd hidden it inside another music book. She placed it on the stand and began to play, keeping her touch light so the sound wouldn't carry too far. This would be her routine now, the assigned piece when anyone could hear, and Chopin in secret. Her own private rebellion. What you doing? Jin's voice made her jump. He stood in the doorway in his pajamas, hair sticking up in all directions. Practicing, Melody whispered. Did I wake you? Jin shook his head and came to sit beside her. Are you playing the forbidden piece? He asked with a grin. Despite everything, Melody smiled. Yes, but don't tell Mom and Dad. I won't, Jin promised. But how are you going to practice with Mr. Reynolds if you're planning to play something else at the showcase? It was a good question. I'll learn both pieces, Melody decided. I'll play the Clementi for him during lessons, but I'll keep working on the Chopin on my own. Smart, Jin nodded. Like a secret agent with a secret song. Melody laughed softly. Exactly like that. You should record yourself, Jin suggested. Then you can listen back and see where you need to improve, like Mr. Reynolds does during lessons. Melody considered this. It was a good idea. Do you think I could use your tablet? Sure, Jin said with an easy shrug. I'll help you set it up. And so began Melody's double life as a pianist. During her next lesson with Mr. Reynolds, she played the Clementi piece with technical perfection, if not enthusiasm. He seemed pleased with her progress, unaware of her secret practice sessions. See, this suits your abilities much better, he said with satisfaction. You'll give a lovely performance. Melody just nodded, thinking of the Chopin waiting for her at home. Every morning before school, Melody practiced for an hour. She played through the Clementi quickly, then devoted the rest of her time to the ballad. Jin would often sit with her, recording her performance on his tablet. In the evenings, they would listen together with Jin offering his honest opinions. That part in the middle sounds rushed, he pointed out one night as they huddled over the tablet. Melody nodded in agreement. You're right. I'll slow it down tomorrow. Jin beamed at being taken seriously. You're going to shock everyone at the showcase, he said confidently. 4 days before the showcase, Melody was practicing after school when the doorbell rang. She quickly switched from Chopin to Clementi as her mother went to answer it. Melody, look who stopped by, her mother called a moment later. Melody turned to see Mrs. Winters standing in the doorway, smiling warmly. Mrs. Winters had been Melody's first real piano teacher, before Mr. Reynolds. She was older now, her hair more gray than brown, but her eyes were just as kind as Melody remembered. Mrs. Winters. Melody jumped up to hug her former teacher. What are you doing here? I ran into your mother at the grocery store, Mrs. Winters explained. She mentioned you're playing in the spring showcase this weekend. I thought I'd come wish you luck. That's so nice of you, Melody's mother said. I'll make some tea. As her mother disappeared into the kitchen, Mrs. Winters settled onto the couch near the piano. So what are you playing for the showcase? She asked. Clementi's Sonatina in C major, Melody answered automatically. Mrs. Winters raised her eyebrows. Really? That seems... She paused, searching for the right word. Simple, for someone of your talent. Melody bit her lip, suddenly close to tears. Mrs. Winters had always believed in her, had been the one to suggest she audition for Mr. Reynolds in the first place. Before she could stop herself, the whole story came tumbling out. How she'd been working on Chopin's Ballade. How Mr. Reynolds had taken it away and given it to Thomas. How she'd been practicing in secret. Mrs. Winters listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled as Melody spoke. When Melody finished, there was a long silence. That doesn't sound like a healthy teaching relationship, Mrs. Winters finally said. Music should lift you up, not tear you down. He's the best teacher in the area, Melody said, repeating what she'd heard so many times. And he has connections with all the conservatories. Mrs. Winters shook her head. The best teacher for you is one who nurtures your talent, not crushes your spirit. She leaned forward. Play it for me. The Ballade. Melody glanced toward the kitchen where she could hear her mother preparing tea. I don't think I should. Just a bit of it, Mrs. Winters encouraged. I'd like to hear how far you've come. Hesitantly, Melody placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. She started softly, keeping one ear tuned toward the kitchen, but soon lost herself in the music. When she finished the first section, she looked up to find Mrs. Winters watching her with shining eyes. Melody, that was beautiful, she said quietly. You found the heart of the piece. Before Melody could respond, her mother returned with a tray of tea and cookies. What was that you were playing? It didn't sound like Clementi. Melody froze, but Mrs. Winters stepped in smoothly. I was asking Melody to show me what she's been learning with Mr. Reynolds over the years. She's made remarkable progress. Melody shot her a grateful look as her mother beamed with pride. After tea, as Mrs. Winters was preparing to leave, she pulled Melody aside. I have a small studio at my house now, just a few students. If you'd like to come practice there, where you can play freely. My door is always open to you. Melody's eyes widened. Really? You wouldn't mind? Not at all, Mrs. Winters squeezed her hand. In fact, I insist. The next day after school, Melody told her mother she was going to the library to study. Instead, she took the bus to Mrs. Winters' house, her sheet music carefully tucked into her backpack. Mrs. Winters' studio was nothing like Mr. Reynolds' grand space. It was simply a converted dining room with a well-loved upright piano and walls covered in children's thank you notes and drawings. But the moment Melody sat down at the piano, she felt more at ease than she had in years. Play, Mrs. Winters said, settling into a chair nearby. And don't worry about making mistakes. This is a safe space. Melody took a deep breath and began the ballad. She played it all the way through, making a few mistakes but continuing on. When she finished, Mrs. Winters didn't immediately point out her errors as Mr. Reynolds would have. Instead, she asked a question. What does this piece mean to you, Melody? Melody thought about it. It feels like someone fighting against something bigger than themselves. There are these moments of beauty and hope, but also struggle. And at the end, she paused. At the end, it feels like, even though the struggle was real, it was worth it. Mrs. Winters nodded, a smile spreading across her face. That's what I hear when you play it. That's why you connect with this piece, because you understand its story. She moved to sit beside Melody on the bench. Now let's work on those few tricky passages. Not because you're not good enough, but because you deserve to play this piece exactly as you feel it. For the next 2 hours, they worked together. Mrs. Winters offered suggestions, but always asked for Melody's input. She pointed out technical issues, but praised Melody's emotional interpretation. It was so different from lessons with Mr. Reynolds that Melody almost couldn't believe it. Can I come back tomorrow? Melody asked as she packed up her things. Of course, Mrs. Winters said. And the day after, if you'd like. The showcase is Saturday, yes? We've got work to do. For the next 3 days, Melody lived a triple life. At school, she was a regular student, trying to focus on classes despite her mind being full of music. At Mr. Reynolds' studio, she was the obedient pupil, playing the Clementi piece with technical precision. And at Mrs. Winters' house, she was the musician she wanted to be, pouring her heart into Chopin's ballade. The night before the showcase, Melody sat at her piano at home, Jin beside her as always. Are you really going to do it? He asked, his voice a mix of excitement and worry. Play the Chopin instead of the Clementi? Melody nodded, her decision made. I am. Mr. Reynolds will be super mad, Jin warned. I know, Melody said quietly. But this isn't about him anymore. It's about the music and about being true to myself. Jin grinned and held up his hand for a high five. That's my sister. Brave and stubborn. Melody laughed as she returned the high five. I'll need both tomorrow. That night, Melody could barely sleep. Her mind kept running through the piece, imagining herself on stage. Would she freeze? Would Mr. Reynolds stop her? Would the audience understand what she was trying to prove? Eventually, she drifted off, her fingers still moving slightly as if playing the piano in her dreams. Tomorrow would change everything one way or another. She was ready. The morning of the spring showcase arrived with golden sunshine streaming through Melody's bedroom window. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the Chopin piece over and over. When her alarm finally went off, she was already awake, staring at the ceiling. Today's the day, she whispered to herself, a mix of excitement and fear swirling in her stomach. Downstairs, her family was buzzing with nervous energy. Her mother had made a special breakfast, blueberry pancakes, Melody's favorite. and her father kept checking his watch even though the showcase wasn't until that evening. "Are you ready, honey?" her mother asked, setting a plate in front of her. "Mr. Reynolds called last night to confirm the program order. You're playing second." Melody nodded, pushing her pancakes around her plate. "I'm ready," she said, and it wasn't a lie. Just not for the piece they were expecting. "Eat something," her father encouraged. "You need your strength today." Jin caught her eye across the table and gave her a tiny wink. Her secret was safe with him. After breakfast, Melody went to the piano for one final practice session. She ran through the Clementi first, just in case anyone was listening. Then very quietly, she played sections of the Chopin, focusing on the parts that had given her trouble during her sessions with Mrs. Winters. As the afternoon wore on, Melody's nerves grew. What if she couldn't go through with it? What if she froze on stage? What if Mr. Reynolds somehow knew what she was planning? "You should get ready," her mother called up the stairs at 4 o'clock. "We need to leave in an hour." Melody opened her closet and took out the dress she'd chosen for the showcase, a simple navy blue dress with a matching ribbon for her hair. As she got dressed, she tried to calm her racing heart. "It's just a piano recital," she told her reflection in the mirror. "You've done dozens of them." But they both knew this was different. The drive to the concert hall felt both too long and too short. Melody sat in the back seat, her sheet music folder clutched tightly in her lap. Inside were both pieces, the Clementi she was supposed to play and the Chopin she was determined to perform instead. When they arrived, the parking lot was already filling up. The spring showcase was a major event, not just for the students and their families, but for the local music community as well. Several prestigious music schools sent representatives each year, scouting for promising talent. "Look at all the cars," her father commented as they pulled in. "Biggest turnout I've seen." Melody's stomach twisted. More people meant more witnesses to either her triumph or her humiliation. Inside, the backstage area was a flurry of activity. Students warming up, parents fussing over last-minute details, Mr. Reynolds moving from student to student with final instructions. "Ah, Melody, there you are." Mr. Reynolds spotted her and came over. "Remember, you're second in the program after Lily. Keep it clean and precise. The Clementi doesn't require flashiness, just good technique." "Yes, Mr. Reynolds," Melody said quietly. He gave her a sharp look, perhaps surprised by her lack of argument, then moved on to the next student. Melody found a quiet corner and took out her music. She pretended to review the Clementi while actually running through the Chopin in her head, her fingers moving slightly above her lap. "Nervous?" a voice asked, and Melody looked up to see Thomas, the student who had been given her piece. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak without giving something away. "Don't be," Thomas said with a confident smile. "Your piece is easy enough. Not like the ballade I'm playing to close the show." There was a hint of superiority in his tone that strengthened Melody's resolve. This wasn't just about proving herself to Mr. Reynolds anymore. It was about showing everyone that music wasn't just about technical skill, it was about heart. Soon, parents and guests began filing into the auditorium. Through a gap in the curtains, Melody could see people finding their seats. Her parents were in the third row, Jin between them, looking around with excitement. A few rows behind them sat Mrs. Winters, who gave a small wave when she spotted Melody peeking out. Seeing her former teacher gave Melody a boost of courage. Someone in that audience believed in her, no matter what happened. At precisely 6 o'clock, Mr. Reynolds stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone to the annual spring showcase. His voice boomed through the microphone as he spoke about the dedication of his students and the prestige of his studio. "We have a wonderful program for you tonight," he announced. "Beginning with some of our younger students and building to our advanced performers. Please hold your applause until the end of each piece." Lily, a 12-year-old with red hair and freckles, went first. She played a Mozart piece competently, if a bit stiffly. When she finished, there was warm applause as she curtsied and left the stage. "Next, we have Melody Park performing Clementi's Sonatina in C major," Mr. Reynolds announced. Melody took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, making it hard to see the audience clearly. She sat at the grand piano, adjusting the bench slightly. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She placed her sheet music, Chopin's Ballade, not Clementi's Sonatinas, on the stand. For a moment, she hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keys. This was her last chance to back out, to play it safe, to do as she was told. Then she thought of all those lessons where Mr. Reynolds had dismissed her emotional interpretation. All those times he'd made her feel small and inadequate. All those hours she'd practiced in secret, determined to prove herself. Melody leaned slightly toward the microphone near the piano. "Good evening," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "There's been a change in the program. I'll be playing Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor." A murmur ran through the audience. From the corner of her eye, Melody could see Mr. Reynolds frozen at the side of the stage, his face a mask of shock and fury. Before he could intervene, Melody placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of the ballade filled the hall, gentle and questioning at first. Melody could feel Mr. Reynolds moving toward the stage, probably to stop her, but she didn't look up. She kept playing, losing herself in the music as she had during those secret practice sessions. As the piece progressed, growing more complex and emotional, she was dimly aware that Mr. Reynolds had stopped. Perhaps he'd realized that interrupting now would only make a bigger scene, or perhaps someone had stopped him. Melody didn't care. For the first time in years, she was playing exactly what she wanted, exactly how she felt it. The hours of practice, the guidance from Mrs. Winters, and her own deep connection to the music all came together in this moment. The piece built to its climactic section, her fingers flying over the keys with both precision and passion. She wasn't just playing the notes, she was telling a story. Her story, about fighting against expectations, about believing in herself when others didn't, about finding her own voice. When she reached the final, triumphant chords, Melody felt a sense of completion unlike anything she'd experienced before. The last note hung in the air for a moment, and then silence. Melody finally looked up. The audience sat stunned, motionless. Had she made a terrible mistake? Then Jin jumped to his feet, clapping wildly. Her parents followed, their faces a mix of surprise and pride. One by one, others stood too, until the entire auditorium was giving her a standing ovation, except for one section. Mr. Reynolds and a few of his most devoted students remained seated, their expressions cold. Thomas, who was supposed to play the same piece later, looked particularly furious. Melody rose and took a small bow, her legs shaky beneath her. As she turned to leave the stage, she caught sight of Mr. Reynolds. His face was tight with anger, his eyes promising consequences. For a moment, doubt crept in. What had she done? Mr. Reynolds was her connection to music schools, to scholarships, to her future. Had she just thrown it all away for one moment of defiance? But as she made her way backstage, several other students whispered congratulations. A woman she didn't recognize stopped her briefly to press a card into her hand. "Westridge Conservatory," she said with a warm smile. "Call me next week. We should talk about your fall plans." Melody clutched the card, hardly daring to believe what was happening. She found a quiet corner and sat down, her hands still trembling from the performance and its aftermath. The showcase continued around her. Other students played their pieces, but Melody barely heard them. She was waiting for Thomas's performance, wondering if he would still play the ballade after her unexpected rendition. When it was finally time for the closing performance, Mr. Reynolds took the stage again, his composure recovered. And now, our final performer of the evening. Thomas Chen will play Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. There was a strange energy in the room as Thomas took his place at the piano. Everyone was wondering the same thing. How would his performance compare to Melody's? Thomas sat at the piano with rigid posture, clearly rattled by the unexpected turn of events. The audience, still buzzing from Melody's performance, gradually fell silent as he placed his hands on the keys. The opening notes of the ballade sounded different under Thomas's fingers. Technically perfect, but somehow lacking the warmth that had characterized Melody's interpretation. As he played, Melody could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes never left the sheet music. Thomas was a skilled pianist. There was no denying that. His fingers moved with precision across the keys, hitting every note exactly as written. But there was something missing, that intangible quality that transformed notes on a page into something that could touch the heart. When he finished, the audience applauded politely. Some even stood, though noticeably fewer than had risen for Melody. Thomas gave a stiff bow and left the stage, not looking in Melody's direction as he passed her backstage. Mr. Reynolds returned to the microphone for closing remarks. thanking everyone for coming and inviting them to a small reception in the lobby. His voice was steady, professional, giving no indication of the drama that had unfolded. As soon as he stepped off stage, however, his mask dropped. He made a beeline for Melody, who was gathering her things. "What was that?" he hissed, keeping his voice low enough that nearby parents couldn't hear. "How dare you change the program without permission?" Melody had expected his anger, but facing it directly still made her stomach tighten. "I wanted to play the piece I'd been working on for months." "You deliberately undermined my authority," Mr. Reynolds continued. "You embarrassed Thomas. You made a mockery of this showcase." Before Melody could respond, her parents appeared at her side, her father's hand coming to rest protectively on her shoulder. "Is there a problem?" he asked, looking between his daughter and her teacher. Mr. Reynolds straightened, his professional demeanor returning. "Mr. and Mrs. Park, I was just discussing with Melody her unexpected choice of program tonight. She was wonderful," her mother said proudly. "I had no idea she could play something so complex." "That's because I instructed her not to," Mr. Reynolds said tightly. "The piece was beyond her capabilities, which is why I assigned her the Clementi." Jen, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. "That's not true," he said boldly. "She played it perfectly." Everyone thought so. Mr. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. "This isn't a matter for children to decide," he said dismissively. "Melody directly disobeyed my instructions, and there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Melody's father asked, his voice taking on a protective edge. "For starters, I'll need to reconsider whether Melody is a suitable student for my studio," Mr. Reynolds said coldly. "I cannot teach someone who shows such blatant disregard for my expertise." A small crowd had begun to gather around them, other students and parents drawn by the tension in their voices. "Perhaps that would be for the best," came a new voice. Mrs. Winters stepped forward, her kind face unusually stern. "I've been concerned about your teaching methods for some time, Victor." Mr. Reynolds blinked in surprise. "Catherine? What are you doing here?" "Supporting my former student," Mrs. Winters said. "The same student you've been systematically undermining for years." More people were gathering now, curious about the confrontation taking place in the wings. "I don't know what Melody has told you," Mr. Reynolds began, "but I assure you—" "It's not just Melody," interrupted another voice. A woman stepped forward, the mother of Lily, who had performed first. "You told my daughter last month that she had the musical sensitivity of a rock. She's 12 years old." There was a murmur through the crowd. Another parent spoke up. "You told my son he was wasting his parents' money." And another, "You made my daughter cry after every lesson for the first 6 months." Mr. Reynolds' face had grown pale. "I maintain high standards," he said defensively. "Not everyone appreciates what it takes to succeed in the competitive world of classical music." "High standards don't require cruelty," Mrs. Winters said firmly. The woman who had given Melody her card earlier pushed through the crowd. "Excuse me," she said, extending her hand to Melody's parents. "I'm Professor Lin from Westridge Conservatory. I was extremely impressed with your daughter's performance tonight." The technical skill was remarkable, of course, but what truly stood out was the emotional depth she brought to the piece. Mr. Reynolds seemed to deflate slightly at the presence of the conservatory representative. "Professor Lin, I wasn't aware you were attending tonight." "I come every year," she replied with a cool smile. "I'm always looking for fresh talent. And I must say Melody's interpretation of the ballade was one of the most moving I've heard from a student her age." She turned back to Melody and her parents. "I'd love to discuss scholarship opportunities for our fall program if you're interested." Melody could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Scholarship?" she repeated faintly. Professor Lin nodded. "Your performance tonight demonstrated not just technical proficiency, but artistic courage. Those are qualities we value highly at Westridge." Mr. Reynolds attempted to insert himself into the conversation. "I've been preparing Melody for conservatory applications, of course. Her technique still needs refinement, but under my continued guidance—" "Actually," Melody's father interrupted, "I think we'll be making other arrangements for Melody's instruction going forward." The look on Mr. Reynolds' face was a mix of shock and indignation. "You're making a mistake," he said stiffly. "No other teacher in this area has my connections or experience." "Perhaps not," Mrs. Winters said mildly. "But there are those of us who remember that music should bring joy, not just technical perfection." As the adults continued talking, Thomas approached Melody, his expression unreadable. She tensed, expecting more anger, but he surprised her. "Your version was better than mine," he said quietly. "I've been playing that piece for 3 years, but it never sounded like that." Melody didn't know what to say. "Thanks," she managed finally. "You played really well, too." Thomas shook his head. "I played the notes. You played the music." He hesitated. "How did you do that? Make it sound so alive?" Melody thought about it. "I guess I just played what I felt, not just what was written." Thomas nodded slowly. "He never lets us do that," he said, glancing toward Mr. Reynolds. "It's always about being perfect, never about being real." More students had gathered around them, many nodding in agreement. Melody realized with surprise that she wasn't alone in her frustrations with Mr. Reynolds' teaching style. They had all felt it, but had been too intimidated to speak up. The reception in the lobby afterward was buzzing with conversation about the evening's unexpected drama. Several parents approached Melody to congratulate her, not just on her playing but on her courage. A few more conservatory representatives gave her their cards, and Mrs. Winters hugged her tightly, whispering, "I always knew you had it in you." When they finally left the concert hall, Melody felt both exhausted and exhilarated. In the car, her parents were unusually quiet. "Are you mad at me?" she finally asked. "For not playing the piece I was supposed to?" Her father glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "No," he said after a moment. "But I wish you'd told us what was happening, about how Mr. Reynolds was treating you." "I didn't want you to worry," Melody admitted, "and I thought maybe he was right, that I wasn't good enough." "Oh, honey." Her mother turned in her seat to look at her. "You've always been more than good enough. We should have seen what was happening." "It doesn't matter now," Jin piped up. "Melody showed everyone tonight." Even that stuck-up Thomas admitted she was better. Melody smiled at her brother's enthusiasm. "I just played the way I felt the music. And that's what made it special," her father said. "I'm proud of you, not just for how beautifully you played, but for standing up for yourself." The next few weeks brought many changes. Melody withdrew from Mr. Reynolds' studio, along with several other students whose parents had witnessed the confrontation at the showcase. Mrs. Winters offered to continue working with Melody until she left for the conservatory, an offer Melody gratefully accepted. Word of what had happened spread through the local music community. Mr. Reynolds' once prestigious studio began to lose students. Parents who had previously been too intimidated to question his methods now sought teachers who offered both technical training and emotional support. 3 months after the showcase, Melody received her official acceptance letter from Westridge Conservatory, along with a substantial scholarship. When she called Professor Lin to accept, the professor mentioned that they'd received several complaints about Mr. Reynolds over the years. "Your performance was the catalyst many needed to finally speak up," she told Melody. "You've changed things for the better, not just for yourself but for many other young musicians." On her last lesson with Mrs. Winters before leaving for the conservatory, Melody played the Chopin Ballade one more time. It felt different now, still challenging, still beautiful, but no longer carrying the weight of having to prove herself. "What will you play for your audition piece at Westridge?" Mrs. Winters asked when she finished. Melody smiled. "I'm thinking of trying something new. Maybe Rachmaninoff," Mrs. Winters laughed. "Always pushing yourself. But that's what makes you special, Melody. You're never afraid to reach beyond what others think you're capable of." As Melody gathered her music to leave, she paused. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for the lessons, but for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "That's the greatest gift a teacher can give," Mrs. Winters replied. "Not just teaching notes and technique, but showing students how to find their own voice. Never forget that, especially if you decide to teach someday yourself." Melody nodded, taking the words to heart. She had learned more than music in the past few months. She had learned about courage, about standing up for herself, about the power of playing from the heart, and those were lessons that would serve her well, no matter where her music took her.